training for me in the past year, especially with the pandemic, has had its challenges. We were 1 week away from the San Francisco Distance Carnival. We did a workout on the track, and Joe pulled us over and he's like, "All right, what do you want to do? This is your last workout of the season," which we hadn't even started our season. So, it's hard to look into the future and say, all right, well, I don't know when the next time I'm going to race is. And that's what we train for. And it's hard to train for that long without knowing what you're going to have. I think I made the best of it by making little goals for myself in the summer, without doing workouts or anything crazy. I mean, no track sessions, nothing like that. But in the middle of the summer, I decided that I was going to go out and hit the highest mileage I'd ever done. So in college, I peaked around 70 miles. That was kind of where I was consistently at. Track season was a little lower, but I would hit about 70 miles, and that was towards the end of my 5th year at San Jose State. And so July of 2020, I went out, and for each week of the month, I wanted to increase my mileage. So I wanted to start at 80 miles, and then end the month at 90 miles. And after 3 weeks, I had got to my 90-mile mark. I just, I wanted to get there so badly that I did it in under 3 weeks. And so at the end of my 3rd week, I was like, okay, well, do I do 92? Because that was about the progression I was doing. It was about 2.5, 3 miles a week. And I decided instead I was going to go for 100 miles, which would be my first 100-mile week that I had ever gone out and done before. So I doubled 7 days that week. And ended it out with a 1.5-mile victory lap after a 15-mile long run that morning. So it was, really cool for me to be able to have these little goals that kept me going. And that base training, I think, is what set me up so well for the spring season, and then a little bit of the Aggie races that we had in the winter as well. Going into the race in Kansas, it was my 2nd race of the season, but my first steeplechase in almost 2 years. My last one being NCAA West Regionals, my senior year of college, 5th year of college, excuse me. And so we had done barrier work throughout the year. We had done hurdles, but we started them a little later than normal because we didn't really know how the season was going to play out. Normally, I would start steeple workouts end of February. I'd say we probably didn't start them this year until middle of March, end of March, which was a little nerve-wracking for me. But going into that race, I was confident in my abilities, and I knew I could at least go out and run faster. I could run physically faster than I did at NCAAs or when I ran my PR my 5th year in college, so 2 years prior. It was the barriers and the water jumps that I was kind of nervous about. Not doing that for 2 years is a little bit of a wake-up call. So going into that race, at that point, the Olympic trials weren't really on my mind. It was, a cool idea if it could happen. But my goal in that race was to get as close as possible to running 8:40. And then I went out in that race and I was in a good position. And then when it started to slow down and I wanted to make my move, I got tripped. And that's how the race goes. I got tripped 2 laps in, so I got up and had 5 laps left to go. You can't always control the race, and you can't always have these magical races that you want to, but you need those ones where you fail, and those make you mentally tougher. And so it was a learning experience, and I walked out of there at least having run a steeple for the first time in 2 years. And it only made me want to run faster because now I have something to prove. Now I have an 8:56 on my record as the first steeple I've run in 2 years. And that's not the time that I can run. I know I could run faster than that. Going up to Portland, originally I was only supposed to race the Portland Track Festival. At the time, Stumptown had a qualifying standard of 8:45, which I hadn't run. And so I didn't think to enter it at the time. My goal is to go up to Portland, run Portland, come back, and that would, we'd go from there. And then, so went into Portland kind of with the same idea as Kansas. I was more confident going into Portland than I was Kansas after having at least one steeple under my belt, albeit with the fall. But I still wanted to get as close to possible as that 840 mark. And so that was my goal. And I wanted to run a smart race and kind of be in it the whole time. And so that's what I went out there and did. I didn't really realize until we went into the last lap where we were time-wise in the race. And so it was also fun because I was battling it out for second place at the time. The entire last lap, it was me and one other guy just going back and forth like this, trying to get second place. And ultimately he got me at the end. My legs just didn't have the drive in them coming down that home stretch. But running an 8:36 after, I mean, that's an 11-second personal best from what I had run in 2019. So right there, I was already pretty stoked. But if you are able to watch any of that race, if you see any of my water jumps, on about 5 of the water jumps out of the 6, 7, I did a 2-foot land. So I jumped off and I landed with 2 feet and then had to restart running again, which kills all of your momentum and takes half a second to a second out of your time because you're stopping and restarting, which is not an efficient way to run. So after that race, I get on the phone with Joe and with Ivan, and we decide that if I can get into the Stumptown meet, that is my best shot at getting into the trials. If I run the same exact pace that I did at Portland Track Festival and just have good water jumps for 4 of those and save 4 seconds, that's the time that I need to be able to hit an Olympic Trials Qualifier. And so that was my goal going to Stumptown. Before I got on the line, I put on my spike and the tongue rips off of it. And so I'm 5 minutes away from racing and in my head, like, well, nothing I can do about this. I've got to go run a race. And I get on the line and I was like, well, see how this goes. Gun goes off. I have a little stumble 200 meters in. My shoe got caught on the trail leg of someone else's going over the barrier. And so now I'm like, all right, we're just going to hang out in the back of the pack. We're going to let things settle out and we'll go from there. And we clipped off 67, 68, 68, 68. And then around there, it started to drop to 69 for the leaders. And I just kept going 68 and closed up on them. And then when we got to 2 laps to go, I realized that if we kept going 68, 69, we weren't going to make the qualifier time. So with 700 meters to go, I moved to the front, dropped the pace down to 67, and then closed the last lap in a 62, which is also the fastest last lap that I've run in a steeple ever. And I hurdled the last water jump, which is not something I've done in practice. It was just the fact that you're going so much faster than normal that you don't know where your feet are supposed to go and when you're supposed to jump. So it's easier to just hurdle straight over it than it is to stop yourself, plant your foot, jump, and push off. I was able to just sail through, keep going off my momentum, and then get into first and hold that spot there. I still afraid I was going to miss the qualifying standard. I knew I had to run a 65 going into the last lap, which I was confident I could do. And at that point, it becomes a balance of you have to run a 65 and also not fall and also still be able to feel your legs, which is not the easiest thing the last lap of the steeplechase. So I was a little, in the back of my mind, nervous, but in the front and in the race, it was something I knew that I could do. And so that's what I went out there and did. And I crossed the line and I really couldn't believe that I just run a qualifier for the Olympic trials. My preparation going into the trials is pretty similar to what I did going into both Portland and Stumptown, kind of a combination of the two. So last week was, back up to just off of peak mileage, but a harder mile workout. We did 3 by in and out miles, and then finished with some quick 400s on the track. So bit longer distance, get the legs tired, and that was 5 days after the race. Came back on Friday and had a steeple specific workout, so 4 by 800 all over hurdles and barriers, and then finished with some quick 300s. And this week we've tapered back down. So yesterday was 3 by 3 by 300 on the track, starting at 50, working down to 45. And then Thursday will just be a light kind of tune up for the legs. So my legs are not too tired right now, but tired enough to where tapering down this week and going into the weekend will be exactly what my legs need to get ready for the trials. Mentally, the race at Portland taught me that I can run with guys who are very close to the 828, 826 range, to the 830s, somewhere around there, which obviously is what I raced. But the difference is going to be going into the trials. You've got guys, depending on the heat and how they place everything, you've got guys who have run 810, 815, which is quite a difference. Even 820 in the steeplechase, that's 10 seconds faster. That's, at least a second and a half every lap. So catching those guys and staying with them and staying competitive means that I have to be in that front group, if not right on them. And what I did in Portland is I gave myself a little bit of room, and it worked out well because the pack came back to me. But if you've got a guy who can run 820, that pack's not going to come back. So I would have to surge in the middle to be able to catch up to them, which, is using energy that if I had just run with them from the start, I wouldn't have to do a surge in the middle. I wouldn't tax my legs as much. And so going into this race, I've got more of a race strategy than I did at Stumptown, but it's still focused on having good water jumps. It's focused on not getting boxed on the inside and hang on to that front pack. If it goes out tactical, then I have to run tactical and kind of just adapt to the race. But at the same time, I know that I need the Olympic standard of 822 to go to the Olympics. And so it's a fine balance of running that time, but also being competitive in the race and trying to balance both of those. Still doesn't feel real. It's still quite strange that in my, this is my first real season out of college, which is also weird to think. I'm going to the US Olympic Trials. If you told me that when I was in college, I wouldn't believe you, because I didn't even qualify for NCAAs. And, I just ran a time that could have potentially won all of NCAA. So I think a lot of that goes with the training that I've put in the last year and the training that Joe has us doing out here. And the group that I'm with has just driven me to become a better runner than I've ever been.